Hello, this is Pat Gilliss. They've asked me to come on this program and tell you some of my experiences and my faith in God, which is the most important thing in my life. And is probably the most important thing in your life too, if you're watching this. I have become a Christian author because I have prayed for many things. And when I prayed, I believed that God would hear me because the preacher said, if you ask it and believe it, he will hear you and he will answer. And so I took that hook, line, and sinker. I believed it. Before I got in church, I was not a very nice person. I probably could cuss any sailor under the table. And if you didn't like me, you really had the rest of your life to get over it because I didn't care. But then I met Jesus. And my life came to a screeching halt and an about face that has led me on a 46 year journey. And I believed it when the preacher said, if you lay hands on him and pray, like I said, I did it. And it worked. It really worked. And I was floored. I was just floored that a dead man was on the ground. And I laid my hands on him and said, in the name of Jesus, don't you dare die. His bowels and bladders had already gave forth. He was dead. And he came back to life after he saw hell. That was, I couldn't even talk about it for a year, even to God, because I thought this could not have happened. This could not have happened, but it did happen. And so I just kept believing and praying for more and more people and praying for more and more things. Sometimes it's a miracle when you really need something and God just gives it to you when you really hope that he heard you and hope that it's going to happen. And I have written 3 books of miracles or just warm-hearted stories that are all true. All of my stories are true. I don't make up anything. I don't make a story up to just like fiction. I only write true stories. And this story I would like to share with you tonight for this time. The title is, Will You Become Someone's Aunt Marie? And I'm going to read this story to you. My life as a small child was challenging. I knew mom and dad loved me, but as the oldest girl, I had more responsibilities than your average child. During the week, my parents both worked full-time jobs, so it was my responsibility at the ripe age of 8 to prepare dinner for a family of 8. My sister, Joanne, helped me. She peeled the potatoes and put the vegetables in the pot to cook. I was responsible to light the old gas stove and match with a match at that ripe old age and cook dinner while standing on a kitchen chair. I did that every night. Having only a 6th grade education himself, my dad never understood the importance of school and homework. His attitude was, if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you. He was raised to believe education was not a good thing. I remember hearing the mocking voice of his mother saying, people with good education think they're too high and mighty. Well, we know that's not true. Hearing this conversation over and over, it developed daddy's attitude, and it was not a good thing to become educated. I realize now, of course, that was just her insecurities speaking. I also now understand why my dad thought as he did. He believed as long as you had a job and a strong back, you didn't need education. The fact of the matter is, the children's full responsibility of cleaning the house every day after school was mine. If you can imagine that, I was the oldest girl, 8 years old. Jackie was the oldest boy, 9 years old. And here you have 6 children between the ages of 9 and infancy who were responsible to manage cooking and cleaning. And I'm sure you can picture the job we all did. We had no time to do nonsense homework, as Daddy put it. There wasn't time for us to play outside either, because when Daddy made the rules, you obeyed. At this time, my parents were not Christians. It was during these hard seasons of our lives that was an occasional haven we would escape to. By the name of this haven was Aunt Marie's. she would take 2 of us at a time for a weekend to play with her 8 children. We were all allowed to go outside all day long and play after we made our beds. We were not used to having breakfast made for us. Aunt Marie was preparing a bowl of hot oatmeal or French toast for us. Mom and Dad had to leave early for work, and we were on our own in the mornings. So Aunt Marie's was really, truly a special treat. When I think back about it now, I know how she did it at first. I don't know how she did it at first. I thought maybe you have 8 children of your own and you think, what's 2 more? What was 2 more? And now I realize it was a lot. Her real thoughts were more likely to be, these kids really need cuddling, which we did. I was glad when she combed my hair with all the love and tenderness she could spare. She never ceased to come up with an extra rubber band or a barrette for me to have, and always made me feel so good about how I looked. Recalling how fresh sheets smelled was a real treat too. I remember Uncle Darrell and Aunt Marie sweetly coming up to the bedroom after we were all in bed to make sure we were tucked in nice and warm. And I think back about the prayers that they prayed over us, making us feel so loved and safe. Last but not least, those blessed good night kisses came from them both. We played so hard, running, climbing trees, playing baseball tag, hide and seek. It was always something wonderful to explore on that farm. One particular story comes to my mind. After the fields were harvested, we were allowed to play in them. My cousins called us city slickers, though it was funny because we didn't know anything about farm life. With frightened expressions on their faces, they told us behind the fields and in the woods there was a haunted house, and convinced us wild boars would run through the woods and get us if we went out there. We did believe them. We did believe them because they knew all about living in the country. One day after the fields were empty, we challenged them to show us. It was a very long walk to this old house, but sure enough, it was there. So we approached the house, and I wondered if it existed. Maybe the ghost did too. My steps were very cautious as we walked into the house. You could see the room where there was a small room towards the back. At the top of the narrow staircase, there was a very small room. They talked us into all going up there. At this moment, Denny jokingly let out a blood-curdling scream and ran down that staircase as fast as he could, like something had him. We nearly killed ourselves trying to get to the first one out the door. He scared the bejeebers out of all of us. When we finally got out of the house, he was rolling on the ground in laughter. He had scared the little city slickers half to death, and we were terrified. But he began running around, and he got up screaming and howling like a ghost until all of a sudden he fell into an old grave. Now, when he went into that grave, we did not know was there. We didn't know that grave was there. When he realized what it was, he was the terrified one now. We had our final laugh. When we got back to the house and told Aunt Marie and Uncle Darrell all the very exciting things that had happened, Uncle Darrell decided to go back and see for himself, and sure enough, it was a very old grave. I guess with all the talk in school the next week, someone picked up on it, and the newspaper did a story about our adventure, and it was amazing. We were never allowed back there again for fear something else would happen. Years later, I was informed all the graves were moved to a better location. By the time bedtime arrived, we were so tired. We had our baths and our warm pajamas on, always pajamas, which we never had at home. We never had that at home. From them, there was a true luxury to wear pajamas, and then we would sleep so soundly all night. In fact, we were so tired, we didn't even mind having to go to bed by 8:30. However, as I drifted off to sleep, thoughts plagued my mind that when I go to sleep, the day will be over and the time here will be shorter because we love being there. It was Aunt Marie and Uncle Darrell was glad for a couple of quiet hours, I'm sure, because she had 8 of her own. And there was, usually 1 or 2 of us would go at a time. So she had her hands full. Whenever it was my turn to stay, the weekends absolutely flew by. There was no way to fully express the wonderful, warm, sweet pictures that are forever etched in my mind. They make me feel warm and fuzzy to this day. If I were to ask her today, do you realize the time what you were actually doing at that time, without a doubt, her answer would be yes. She knew she was giving us some joy and some happiness, and most important, love. And then she prayed with us before we went to sleep, and it made us feel good when she did that. I don't know how many weekends she had 2 extra children to watch, feed, and bathe, but I do know there was a lot of them, and I'm sure she never counted them or remembered the amount of times. When you're acting out of pure love, these things never added up. God saw it all. He already knows she was an earth angel. Through the eyes of a small child, I didn't see those extra children in the house situations like an adult does. We only knew we were going to be wonderful 2 days. We didn't mind the fact that you had to eat something at the table if you didn't like it. We didn't mind sleeping 3 and 4 in a giant bed. We just knew it would be forever, it seemed, until you got to go back to Aunt Marie's house again. So I'm going to stop it there at the story there, because there's another 2 or 3 pages. But it gives you an idea of the change when someone prayed. We didn't know what that was. We didn't know how to pray. We didn't hear anybody pray in our home. So she actually marked my life. And I wrote the story. Would you become someone's Aunt Marie? Would you take a child that might be a little dirty and gruffy and kind of uncared for and make them feel good about themselves no matter what? I try to do that all the time. In fact, I don't just stop with that. When I go through Walmart and I see a sad face, I will look at that person, and I don't care how grungy they may look or how worn and tattered they may look. It all shows on the face. And so I will look at that person, and I will find something about that person that would be something nice to say. And I looked at this one woman, and she was just really, really frumpy, but poor. And I looked at her and I said, oh, that color goes perfect with your complexion. It's beautiful. And she went, oh, well, thank you. And she walked away with a little more bounce to her step. So I thought, I need to do this all the time. I need to try to remember to do this all the time, and drop a compliment that someone goes home and they'll talk about it at the dinner table. This lady said that my blouse really went great with my complexion. She won't forget that. She will feel that love and kindness. So I wrote these stories. All of them are true stories. Some of them, many of them, are about miracles. But this night I've chosen to speak about who kind of turned us to God, because Aunt Marie wouldn't let you eat dinner unless you prayed. You had to say the grace. Well, my brother, Neil, he was there one day and they said, no, Neil, you can't eat. We have to say grace. And he said, what? And she said, say grace. And he went, grace. And so everybody had a laugh. But he really didn't know what grace was. We didn't know what grace was. And later on in life, our parents got in church, and boy, our lives changed. Our lives really changed. But when that preacher said you could pray for somebody in the name of Jesus, and he will answer. If you have the faith to believe it, he will answer. Well, I thought, well, he must have been talking to me too. So the first thing that happened was a motorcycle accident right in front of us. And I got up there on the hill. My husband got up on that hill, and his mouth was full of blood, and he was dying. He was dying. And I said to his buddy, roll him on his side. He's suffocating. He's got to have air. And somebody said, no, if his neck's broke, you could kill him. And I said, we are 5 minutes either way from an ambulance. You got to get the blood out of his mouth. He's going to die. So the blood ran out of his mouth. The guy rolled him up on his side. The blood ran out of his mouth, and he died. His bladder and bowels gave forth. His breath left his body, and he died. And everybody was screaming, do this, do that. I didn't even think about it. I just took 3 fingers like this, and I smacked him on his forehead. I said, in the name of Jesus, don't you dare die. And that man sucked in a breath, and his face was wild with panic. And he screamed, and he jumped to his feet, and he took off running. And I told my husband, I said, look at that man's face. He just saw hell. That man just saw hell. So I couldn't even talk to God about it right away. I just couldn't talk to him almost a year. I just couldn't even ask him, did that really happen? And finally I got the nerve, and I said, Jesus, did that really happen? Was that man dead, or was that my imagination? Was that hell I saw in his face, or was that my imagination? We pray for people all the time. We just want to know what happened. So I asked him, and that very 2 days later, this lady was talking to my sister out at our church, and she said, I think I might know you. Did you ever pray for a guy in a motorcycle accident? She said, no, my sister did. And she said, he saw hell that day. He quit his drugs that day. He's never gone back to it because he literally saw hell, and it terrified him so bad that he did not ever want to go there again. And he's never done a drug since. So I was like floored, but yet I knew in my heart. I told my husband that's what it looked like on his face. He was so horrified. So I don't know what I'm supposed to. I'm telling you this because I have these books. This here, I don't know if you can see it, No More Crumbs. My Aunt Marie, I got in one story, then I turned on to another one. But my Aunt Marie, I wrote this story in the book, and she had 8 children, and 2 of them had already passed, but not one of them had read the story. And I thought, I would think that they would read the story, but they haven't. And maybe it's because it's a painful thing. I don't know why they haven't. I don't know why they haven't. But the fact is, I appreciated their mama. I really appreciated her teaching us God hears our prayers. And I hope anyone watching this program tonight, because now I have 3 books of miracles that I prayed for, and God answered. I didn't do it. He did it. And when you pray and you pray believing, and then when it happens, you think, oh, it worked. And then you're not afraid to try it again and again. And so I have written 3 books of miracles, all short stories. They start and stop, several stories in each book, but they're all true. And if God would do this for me, he would do this for you. Just ask him and believe he will. Just ask him. That's called faith. Believe he will. When I ask him, I expect to see it. And I've seen 3 books full. And people think, well, I can't do that. I'm going to tell you something. If I could do it, anybody can do it. I was terrible. I was terrible before Jesus Christ took over my life. I smoked 3 packs of Winston a day, probably could cuss a sailor under the table. I was terrible. And then when he touched me, it was instant. It was like, whoa, I never felt such love. And so I found a church, and I just knew that this was going to be the rest of my days, that I was going to pray for people. And I do pray for people. I'm working on book number 4. I just want you to know that I am nothing. I'm nobody. I've written 3 books. I'm an author. But I didn't come out of Candyland. I mean, I was in the world, and I was angry, and sometimes I felt mean. And then when Jesus came into my life, it changed greatly, not just a little. People was like, whoa, is that Patty? Yeah, that's Patty. My family calls me Patty, but I go by Pat. My books are Pat Gilliss, and they're all on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all over the world. I've sold books in Japan. I've sold books, well, all over the world. England, this lady wrote me from England. A missionary wrote me from China. Somebody had sent it to him. And so I just want you to know that no matter where you came from, no matter what your background was, my background was bad and rough. But my current and my for the last 46 years, I have changed, and I have seen so many miracles. And I'm not talking, yeah, there's some things that people call it. It was a miracle to them. It didn't seem like a real big miracle to me, but it was a miracle to them. But then the other ones, like groceries showing up on a porch when I was going through a very hard time. my first husband, we ended up having to split, had to leave to live. And so my sister went through the same thing at the same time. So we shared a house, and our kids always with us. And we would get up in the morning, and there was bags of groceries on the back step. And there was an oil man that came and filled the tank. And I said, we don't have the money to pay for this. He said, no, already paid for it. Everything's taken care of. That was God. He provided because he knew where we had come from, why we had come from, and he saw the needs. So we just kept living for him. And all this time I've been in a church 46 years. I've seen just about everything. And I've shared some of them in these books. They're priced to sell on Amazon. Pat Gilliss books, Gilliss, 2 S's. But they're all true stories, short true stories. And if you would like to do that, I would love for you to read them. I would love for you to read them. And more than that, I hope that they will encourage you to read for your own faith, to be created greater, and greater, till you can believe God for anything. Because he is there. He's there for us to call on him. And he's there to heal and to help. When you prayed, like I said, for that dead man on the ground, and he came back to life. But then there's other times. This one girl, she was just so very, very sick. She was so sick, and her mother was going to bring her to this house. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, this is really, I don't know if you know what Chiari malformation is, but it's the brain drops down into the spinal area, some of it, and it starts crowding, and it's can be very deadly. So she came here, and her mother brought her here, and I was really on the spot because I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is impossible. They're asking me to pray for something that is physically possible, but not just on its own possible. It has to be a very serious surgery done, and it still can leave them pretty maimed. Well, anyway, she came in, and I thought, you know what? If they've got the faith to come, I've got the faith to pray for. And so I did. And I used the word slowly. God, bring this brain slowly back up in the cavity where it's supposed to be, instead of into her spine. That only you can do, or the doctors. It's you or the doctors. So she came, and I prayed, and honestly, I didn't feel anything. But I spoke the words in faith. Whether I felt it or not, I spoke it. And the girl went back to the doctor that next week, and the doctor said, I've never seen this before, but for some reason, this brain stem is pulling back up. It's pulling back up into the brain. We have never seen this, and we have never read of anyone else that has seen this. And the mother said she was prayed for, and he said that's the only thing that could have done it. The prayer did it. She still didn't have to have that. After all these years, she still is doing fine, because God's not an Indian giver. He's not an Indian giver. If he gives you your miracle, it's your miracle. But I hope that this has helped somebody to believe for anything, because if we go by our limitations, it won't happen. So we have to see it in his hands totally, because he can do anything. And I know there's many out there that have witnessed miracles just like me. I'm nobody special. I don't say any special single prayer. I just pray and praise and thank and ask him to guide my steps. Order my steps this day, oh God. Help me to be a help to someone else that might need it today. And I get emotional when I talk about it because I feel his presence. But if you will let him, he will use you. And you can't grade yourself. You can't say, oh, I don't think I could do that. You're right. You can't. Just let him do it. You ask the one you know that can do it. And let him take it from there. I know that Jesus will help every single one of you if you will ask him and believe And look at all the many prayers that will be answered for some of your friends, some of your loved ones. So I think I've probably spent my time here talking. I probably talked your head off, but they're all true stories. They're all true stories. And I fail daily. Everybody does. Everybody fails God daily. But he just covers that with his blood. When he covers you and forgives you, he rolls that forward. He rolls that forward, and you don't have it anymore. He gives you the faith, and he wants you to use it. That's why he gave it to us. Don't be afraid to ask him for anything. There's some amazing things I've got all through my books. I can't even, I'm on the screen right now, and I can't even think of some of them because I'm so nervous. But the fact is, every one of those stories are true. Every story, no matter how crazy it sounds, and there's some pretty crazy ones in there. But my Aunt Marie, when she left this world, she was ready to meet him, and she was an angel. She's up there, an angel now too. Her and Uncle Daryl were just a haven when we would go out there, and they'd tuck us in and kiss us goodnight and pray over us. So